Imagine standing at the forefront of an army, just 20 years old, your heart pounding as the deafening roar of thousands of warriors fills your ears. Ahead lies an empire greater than your own, led by generals seasoned from decades of conquest. Yet, in your hand lies a weapon far deadlier than any sword. A mind that sees the battlefield not merely as a contest of strength, but as a complex puzzle waiting to be solved. This is not the story of ordinary warfare. This is the astonishing saga of how Alexander the Great, one of history's youngest conquerors, reshaped battle tactics forever, achieving victories that seemed impossible through ingenious strategies, visionary leadership, and unparalleled bravery. Alexander was born in a turbulent era, shaped from childhood by the relentless ambitions of his father, King Philip II of Macedon. But while Philip built the foundations of a powerful military machine, it was Alexander who transformed these raw elements into something revolutionary. At its core, his army was composed of highly disciplined infantry known as the Macedonian phalanx, a devastating force characterized by its fearsome long spears, called sarissas, reaching lengths up to 18 feet. Soldiers formed tightly packed units, their spears creating an impenetrable wall of iron. Against traditional infantry, this formation was nearly unstoppable, allowing Alexander to dominate enemies who relied on brute force or inferior weaponry. But it wasn't just the phalanx raw power that made Alexander's army unbeatable. It was his innovative way of integrating cavalry, infantry, and light skirmishers seamlessly into combined arms tactics. Unlike many of his contemporaries who viewed cavalry as mere support, Alexander elevated mounted units into a striking force capable of decisive maneuvers. At the Battle of Chaeronea in 338 BC, one of his first major battles alongside his father, young Alexander commanded the cavalry, executing a tactical feint that fractured enemy lines. His early understanding that warfare required adaptability and deception became a cornerstone of his future victories. One of Alexander's greatest tactical breakthroughs was his relentless commitment to speed and surprise. He understood deeply that psychological dominance could dismantle an enemy before swords even crossed. Thus, his forces regularly marched at unprecedented speeds, covering vast distances far faster than any foe anticipated. This allowed him to strike adversaries when they least expected, often catching them unprepared, exhausted, and terrified. The Battle of Granicus River in 334 BC was a textbook example. Persian forces confidently assumed the Macedonians would hesitate at the river's natural barrier. Alexander shocked them by launching an immediate and ferocious assault across the river, his cavalry leading a daring charge that shattered Persian ranks. It was audacity, aggression, and sheer unpredictability, the hallmarks of Alexander's warfare. Yet Alexander was more than merely a tactical genius. He was a master at reading the battlefield, adapting rapidly to changing circumstances, and exploiting enemy weaknesses in real time. At the iconic Battle of Issus in 333 BC, facing the Persian king Darius III's vast army on terrain that should have favored his opponent, Alexander saw an opportunity rather than an obstacle. Outnumbered more than 2-1, he employed a bold tactic, channeling enemy forces into a narrow battlefield bordered by mountains and sea. By doing so, he neutralized the Persians' numerical advantage and systematically dismantled their cohesion. Then, with surgical precision, Alexander led a cavalry charge directly at Darius himself, sowing panic and triggering an instantaneous Persian collapse. In mere hours, he had transformed what appeared an impossible scenario into an overwhelming triumph. Perhaps Alexander's most revolutionary tactic was his perfect execution of the hammer and anvil maneuver, a strategy that combined his infantry phalanx, the anvil, with elite cavalry, the hammer. The phalanx engaged enemy infantry directly, pinning them in place, while Alexander personally led the companion cavalry to deliver devastating flank or rear attacks. This deadly combination required meticulous coordination and absolute trust, qualities Alexander cultivated in his troops through relentless drilling, shared hardship, and personal example. At the Battle of Gaugamela in 331 BC, facing an enemy army 3 times the size of his own, Alexander unleashed the hammer and anvil with flawless precision. As the phalanx held firm, absorbing enemy pressure, Alexander circled his cavalry wide, striking deep behind Persian lines. The result was a catastrophic defeat for the Persian Empire, leading directly to Alexander's ascension as the undisputed ruler of Asia Minor. Alexander also possessed a profound psychological insight into the minds of his opponents. His ability to manipulate enemy expectations and morale often proved as decisive as any battlefield maneuver. One remarkable tactic was his frequent use of feigned retreats. At the siege of Tyre in 332 BC, a heavily fortified island city seemed impregnable. Realizing brute force would fail, Alexander devised a cunning psychological warfare strategy. He built a causeway across the sea toward Tyre, openly drawing enemy attention and defenses. Simultaneously, he secretly prepared siege towers and naval forces elsewhere. When Tyre defenders focused on repelling the frontal assault, Alexander launched simultaneous surprise attacks from unexpected directions. The psychological shock of suddenly facing multiple breaches led to the rapid downfall of a city considered unconquerable. Further exemplifying Alexander's genius was his deep understanding of logistics, often overlooked, yet critical in ancient warfare. Alexander's rapid movements required extraordinary logistical planning. His meticulous organization ensured supplies reached his fast-moving troops even across hostile terrain. To maintain such efficiency, he established a network of supply depots and appointed specialized officers dedicated to logistical management. This strategic foresight allowed him to campaign far beyond typical limits, outlasting and outmaneuvering opponents who failed to grasp the significance of logistics. Another underappreciated aspect of Alexander's military success was his leadership style. His willingness to share the same hardships as his men, enduring brutal marches, sleeping rough, and personally leading dangerous attacks, earned him unmatched loyalty. His troops didn't merely obey orders, they believed fervently in their leader, inspired by a commander who stood shoulder to shoulder with them in battle. This psychological bond was pivotal during campaigns that pushed them beyond physical and emotional limits, such as the grueling expedition through the deserts of Persia and the formidable Hindu Kush mountains. Moreover, Alexander's multicultural approach to warfare significantly expanded his tactical repertoire. Unlike other conquerors who imposed their own doctrines on defeated peoples, Alexander absorbed and adapted foreign military tactics into his army. Upon conquering Persia, he swiftly incorporated Persian archers, horsemen, and elephants into his ranks, creating an even more versatile fighting force. This willingness to embrace diversity allowed Alexander's army to remain fluid, flexible, and consistently surprising to opponents accustomed to rigid warfare traditions. The inclusion of war elephants, famously adopted from his Indian campaigns, was another tactical game-changer. Initially confronting elephants at the Battle of the Hydaspes River in 326 BC, Alexander recognized their immense potential. Rather than being intimidated, he developed innovative countermeasures, including specialized formations and diversion tactics to neutralize their threat. Later, integrating these formidable beasts into his own ranks, Alexander further enhanced his army's psychological and physical intimidation factor. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of Alexander's tactical genius was his audacity, an absolute refusal to recognize limits. Even facing seemingly insurmountable challenges, Alexander found ways to convert disadvantage into advantage. His military exploits were not simply acts of brute strength. They were calculated risks, expertly executed to exploit enemy vulnerabilities and leverage psychological dominance. Each battle was a carefully crafted narrative designed to break the enemy's will before their armies collapsed physically. Ultimately, Alexander's innovative tactics, extraordinary adaptability, psychological mastery, and unmatched bravery combined into an unstoppable military juggernaut that reshaped the ancient world. His legacy influenced military strategy for generations, from Julius Caesar to Napoleon Bonaparte, all inspired by Alexander's revolutionary understanding of warfare. But beyond strategy, Alexander's true brilliance lay in recognizing war's human dimension, understanding the soldiers he led and enemies he faced. His victories weren't just strategic, they were profoundly human, built on trust, courage, and vision. Alexander's battles remind us that the art of war is as much about understanding hearts and minds as about wielding swords and spears. As you reflect on Alexander's legacy, consider this. His tactics continue to teach powerful lessons about innovation, adaptation, and leadership. Lessons that transcend warfare, resonating even in modern fields of business, sports, and politics. Alexander didn't merely conquer lands, he conquered expectations, reshaped possibilities, and forever altered how humanity perceives warfare and leadership. Alexander the Great's greatest conquest was not the empires he seized, but the enduring legacy of strategic genius he left behind, a legacy that continues to fascinate, inspire, and captivate the world today. Alexander's relentless pursuit of innovation was not merely confined to adapting his tactics. He also displayed a remarkable intuition for choosing battlefields that neutralized enemy strengths. At the Battle of Hydaspes, Alexander faced King Porus, whose formidable army boasted towering war elephants and fierce warriors renowned across India. Rather than launching a frontal assault, Alexander meticulously scouted the terrain and identified weaknesses in Porus's position. He orchestrated a daring nighttime river crossing under torrential monsoon rains, deceiving Porus into believing his army remained stationed far upstream. This audacious maneuver allowed Alexander's troops to emerge undetected behind enemy lines. By daybreak, confusion rippled through the ranks of Porus's army as Alexander swiftly advanced, executing a series of flanking attacks. His calculated positioning turned Porus's strengths, such as the powerful but cumbersome elephants, into tactical liabilities. The massive beasts, panicked by Macedonian skirmishers and unfamiliar formations, became uncontrollable, trampling their own infantry in chaos. Alexander's visionary exploitation of battlefield topography once again secured a seemingly impossible victory. Alexander's genius extended far beyond battlefields into strategic diplomacy. Understanding that continuous warfare exhausted resources and manpower, he often sought surrender through strategic intimidation and generous terms rather than prolonged sieges or battles. After the decisive victory at Gaugamela, Alexander approached Babylon not as a ruthless conqueror, but as a liberator, respecting local customs, religions, and governance. Babylon's gates opened willingly, sparing Alexander's forces the grueling toll of siege warfare. This practice of strategic leniency significantly accelerated his conquest, conserved his strength, and facilitated smoother transitions of power. Such diplomatic astuteness made Alexander uniquely adept at balancing force and diplomacy, swiftly securing vast territories with minimal resistance. Another overlooked dimension of Alexander's tactical acumen was his ability to rapidly assimilate intelligence and use reconnaissance effectively. He established an extensive intelligence network that meticulously gathered information about enemy troop movements, morale, resources, and fortifications. This constant stream of data allowed Alexander to make informed, swift decisions on the battlefield, frequently catching his adversaries off guard. At numerous key battles, Alexander's superior knowledge of enemy dispositions allowed him to stage ambushes, feigned withdrawals, and preemptive strikes with devastating efficiency. This intelligence-driven approach was especially evident in campaigns against guerrilla-style opponents who relied on terrain and ambush tactics, demonstrating Alexander's unmatched strategic foresight. Beyond his military successes, Alexander was an extraordinary communicator, skilled at inspiring his diverse army, composed of Greeks, Macedonians, Persians, Egyptians, and many others. Recognizing the challenges inherent in leading a multicultural force, he personally learned languages, customs, and traditions to bridge divides. By embracing rather than suppressing diversity, Alexander cultivated loyalty across varied ranks, creating a cohesive fighting force fiercely devoted to their charismatic leader. His speeches before battles were legendary, blending appeals to glory, honor, comradeship, and collective destiny to ignite unparalleled motivation. The resulting morale translated directly into disciplined execution of complex tactics on the battlefield, often turning precarious situations into spectacular triumphs. Moreover, Alexander's mastery of siege warfare was revolutionary. Understanding that sieges were resource-intensive and draining, he pioneered rapid assault siege methods to swiftly conclude these operations. At the Siege of Gaza in 332 BC, Alexander employed innovative siege towers, battering rams, and undermining techniques, combining relentless psychological pressure with physical attacks. His ability to coordinate simultaneous assaults from multiple directions left defenders disoriented and demoralized, often leading them to surrender quickly rather than face prolonged torment. His methodical yet rapid approach to siege warfare became a template emulated by military leaders centuries later. Alexander also demonstrated extraordinary foresight in structuring his army's hierarchy and promoting talent based purely on merit rather than nobility or lineage. Unlike traditional armies reliant on aristocratic privilege, Alexander's forces were remarkably meritocratic, offering rapid advancement to soldiers who displayed exceptional skill, courage, and loyalty. This merit-based system cultivated fierce competition and exceptional motivation among troops, continually elevating the overall quality of Alexander's military. His emphasis on meritocracy ensured a continuous influx of talented officers capable of independent command, a crucial factor as his army expanded rapidly into unknown territories. Additionally, Alexander's understanding of strategic withdrawals was revolutionary for its time. He saw retreats not as failures, but as tactical tools designed to preserve forces, regroup, and strike later with renewed vigor. During his campaigns in Bactria and Sogdiana, modern Afghanistan and Uzbekistan, Alexander frequently executed strategic withdrawals, deliberately luring enemies into unfavorable terrain before launching devastating counterattacks. This calculated tactic preserved his army's strength and morale, systematically wearing down elusive guerrilla opponents accustomed to exploiting harsh terrain. By redefining retreats as strategic maneuvers, Alexander drastically enhanced the operational flexibility of his army, confounding enemies who misinterpreted such moves as signs of weakness. Finally, Alexander's visionary leadership created a legacy of resilience within his army, a force capable of overcoming immense adversity through disciplined training, psychological conditioning, and an indomitable sense of mission. Even in the brutal campaigns of India and the return through harsh deserts, Alexander's army maintained remarkable cohesion and fighting effectiveness. His leadership forged soldiers who could adapt instantly to changing battlefield circumstances, soldiers who remained unwavering in their trust even when victory seemed improbable. In the end, Alexander's true genius was not limited merely to his unparalleled strategic and tactical brilliance. It encompassed an innate ability to unite diverse peoples, inspire absolute loyalty, and envision possibilities beyond the imagination of his contemporaries. His impact resonated far beyond ancient warfare, influencing countless military leaders and thinkers who studied his tactics obsessively in later centuries. Alexander's strategies continue to illuminate fundamental truths about leadership, innovation, adaptability, and the human spirit's indomitable capacity for achievement. The lessons he imparted through his astonishing victories remain as relevant and powerful today as they were over 2,000 years ago.